Hello, my name is James Taylor.
And I am still Maria Franzoni. Hello, James.
You're definitely still Maria Franzoni. You haven't changed. It's not your digital twin here that's joined us today. And everyone, you're listening, you're watching the SpeakersU Podcast. Maria, good to see you. How are things?
You've got me thinking now. If I had a digital twin, I'd make her quite different. I think she'd definitely be more coiffed. There'd be no wrinkles. She'd be Botoxed,
Perfect.
which I'm too much of a coward to do. I'm too much of a coward to do any of this stuff. So she'd be Botoxed and she'd be pulled and yeah, she'd look fabulous. Probably a Jessica Rabbit type shape, I think, as well in terms of figure. I quite like that.
I like that. That sounds very good. Excellent. So this week, as I was perusing this book, for those who don't know, this is Maria's book, The Bookability Formula, and you have actually not just one, but 2 chapters on knowing, getting known, how to get known, what for, and who by. So I thought we would do this episode on how speakers can get known. So we're talking about marketing, branding, all those good things as well. So why did you do 2 chapters on known? That's the first thing I was going to ask you.
You know because you've read it, but I love the way you pronounce it, by the way. Is that a Scottish thing?
Noun. Is it noun or known? I don't know.
I don't know.
Known.
I'm Italian, so I say known.
Known.
Okay. I say known.
Okay.
But anyway, please write in and tell us how you pronounce it. But we know what we're talking about, right? I'll see what I did there. No, there's 2 chapters. One because it's about being known for something, and then the other part is about being known by someone. So it's about who do you need to be known by and what do you need to be known for. So there's 2 parts to it, because you don't have to be known by the whole world, you see, James. You just need to be known by the right people for the right thing.
No, I'm always fascinated. Sometimes if you go to a dinner party or a party of some sort, and someone asks you, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a professional speaker, and this things. And the first thing said, oh, have I seen you on the telly? Are you a celebrity? Are you famous? And I said, look, I am not a celebrity. And actually, I love that. I always remember from my time in the music industry, having worked with a lot of very famous people that you'd recognize if you went shopping or out and about. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. And I always loved spending time with a lot of the songwriters who had written all these huge hits and who had very nice royalty checks. And no one knew who they were outside of their industry. Like within the industry, people knew them, but they were kind of anonymous. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. And I guess as speakers, you don't have to be, as you say, you don't have to be known by everyone. You don't have to be a celebrity. You could become known just within your field or your topic area.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things when I was looking at the most booked speakers, because that's what the book's about, it's the most booked speakers in our speaker bureau, I did expect them to be the celebrities, the famous names, the big names, and it wasn't. And if you took the names out and said them outside of the speaking industry, people wouldn't have heard of them, and still now people won't have heard of them. So it's quite fascinating that it's not about being known by everybody. And so it makes life a lot easier. You've just got to be known by the people who book speakers, right?
Yeah. So let's have an imaginary scenario. Let's imagine someone has been maybe a consultant or working for a big company, a corporate in some way, or they've come from a completely different industry, different career, and they're really wanting to launch their career as a speaker. What questions should they be asking themselves in terms of this idea of known, being known within the industry or by the kind of ideal clients that they want to speak for?
I think you've got to go back to, okay, who does my topic help? Who's the ideal audience? Who are the organisations that are going to benefit most from my speaking and my topic and the outcomes that I deliver? And then that's who you want to be known by. And there'll be a variety of people. There'll be the end clients themselves who are running the events. I call them the people who own the audience, if you like. It'll be their employees or their leaders or their clients and prospects. So there's one route. Then there's the meeting professionals, the meeting managers, the meeting planners, event organisers, that you want to be known by those people who are servicing those end clients. And then potentially speaker bureaus as well, and agents. So you may also want to be known if if and when you're ready, because there's sort of, you need to be a certain level before you go to speaker bureaus, but you want to be known by those three categories of people, those who are going to benefit from your topic.
Now, in the book, you talked about, I think London Speaker Bureau, when you were involved in that business, they had like 4,000 speakers. They probably got 10,000 speakers or something on their roster. So let's imagine they've got 1,000 speakers that just speak on leadership, for example. How do you get known? How do you stand out in a very crowded market, and a market that really has no barriers to entry? So every year you have another 100 speakers that are coming in to speak on your topic area.
Yeah. So you have to have something unique about you. I mean, so you were very clever, because you went into a space that's quite a busy space. You went into creativity, but you carved out your own special part of creativity. In fact, you created your own topic, really, which is a risk, but it worked very, very well for you, and that's how you became known. But actually, I'm going to turn it round on you, because I think you did some really clever stuff when you entered into the speaking world. And one of the very clever things you did, you don't mind me spilling the beans on this, do you? On how you did this? No,
we can be open here.
You can edit it, can't you?
Just me, you, and the listener. It's fine. I can edit if we get too confidential. I'll edit it out.
You'll edit it out. So if this next bit's edited out, you know what's happened. So what I saw that you did was really clever. So you actually found the top voices, the top names, the most known people in the space of creativity. And that was creativity experts, speakers who spoke on the topic of creativity. And I don't know how you managed to do it. Maybe you can tell us how. You interviewed them and had them on podcasts or summits. And then when people were Googling those big names, and I'm talking big names, right, in the space, who else would pop up but James Taylor? That's very clever. You're a very clever chap.
No, I mean, I just saw, as you said, it is a crowded, the area that I speak on, creativity and innovation, that is a very crowded market. And so one of the first things that I did, and actually I did it in a completely different industry. And this is why you can often take things from previous careers and move them apply them in the world of speaking. So before I entered the world of speaking, I was managing a lot of music artists. And one of the things I created as part of that was these large online summits where I would interview, or I'd have someone else interview the top, in this case, guitarists. So you probably don't even know this, but I did a summit called the Online Guitar Summit. I'm not even a guitarist, I'm a drummer. And I interviewed some of the 50 top guitarists, rock guitarists, all kind of guitarists. And then we made it available. It's a ticketed virtual event. And we had 10,000 attendees on that event.
Wow.
And so then I said, well, I can do the same thing, but with the area that I'm interested in, and I get to learn, and everyone else can get to learn at the same time. So I interviewed, I think it was called the Creative Life Summit, was the first one. I interviewed these experts on creativity and innovation. And then I thought, why should I stop there? And why shouldn't I interview the world's best keynote speakers? Because sometimes people are just typing in, not necessarily keynotes, creativity speaker, but top keynote speakers or top other topics. So I then interviewed 150 of the world's top global keynote speakers, and then that got me, and it's actually quite a nice thing to be able to do then, to be able to say to a client, yes, I know these other speakers, I've actually interviewed them because they've all been on my summit. So you're always being compared with or you're competing against other speakers anyway. So that was really great thing. I mean, I think that trick has probably been done now. I couldn't really use that one again, or maybe you can in different formats. And I think if there was one other thing that I did quite early on, was to think, and this comes from the music industry side again, was to think about brand and positioning quite early on, how I wanted to be perceived externally. So that's everything from video, photography, brand values. In fact, I think even as early as 2018, we created a brand guide for me. So my team could, if they're putting stuff out, it had a certain brand voice. And so there's a certain things that we put in there that I know that it works when other people start saying those words back to me. Oh, you're the person about this. You're the super creativity guy. Or you're the guy that always wears a 3-piece suits on stage. You're like that British kind of like, tailored thing that's going on. When I hear that coming back, I know that's working. And that is really just about branding, positioning, and message discipline. repeating the same message time in podcasts, interviews with clients, bureaus, events, people, so to the point where you kind of get a little bit sick of it. But then when you start hearing come back from other people in a good way, then you think, oh, actually this is now starting to cut through. And I think good politicians, they're probably the best at this, because they know, keep your message relatively simple and then just keep going on that message.
Yes, unfortunately, there are some politicians who are good at it, but let's not go into politics.
Very good,
no,
we won't get into a lot of politics.
Let's not do politics. No, what you did is fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant, and it is about that, being known for one thing, and you focused on that one thing and stayed in your area, and you've stayed in that creativity space. And obviously, the message has developed, and it continues to develop because things are changing in the world. But you're still known for creativity, and you're in that space. Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. And you can have. I mean, I saw someone the other day. There's another Eric Weil, who's a speaker. He tends to speak on really big stages. That's his thing, because what he does is he speaks about creativity, but on stage, as he's giving his presentation, he's actually painting, and by the end of it, this painting is revealed to the audience, and so there's an audience interaction. There's an artistic thing. It works really well visual on big stages. That at the same time. And so he took his background as an artist, as a painter, linked it to creativity and creativity skills training, and then kind of put it together. So you can take things from your other lives, your other interests, and then bring them into that. I know people that do it with music, even my area, like Josh Linkner, who does it with music. And he talks about what business leaders can learn from jazz musicians. And at the end, the curtains are revealed, and he's got an entire jazz band there, and he picks up the guitar and he starts playing a jazz tune at the end of his keynote. So you can have fun with it. There's no rules really.
Yeah, and it's important what you said as well about, so you were saying about how do you stand out? You stand out by doing something that is different. You've talked about it in these examples, and that you're bringing something of you into things. To be remembered, you've got to be authentically you, and look at who am I? What is my background? And I mean, I worked with, and I mentioned this in the book, I worked with two incredible women who have amazing backgrounds, and yet when they were promoting their speaking, they were leading just with their topic, and the topic's really important, but they weren't talking about their backgrounds. One's a former combat helicopter pilot. I think you want to lead with that, especially when you're a glamorous woman, right? Because you don't expect it. It's not, it's rare. And the other one was fighting wildlife crime, a conservationist. How many of those do you know, right? Very few. But both of these women, and this is Sarah Furness and Holly Budge, were not leading with those amazing backgrounds and that incredible profile. So I love the fact that you've taken a lot from your music, and that you bring that in too. Love the example of the artist and of course the music. Bring things in from your profile, from your experience and expertise. That makes you stand out.
Yeah, and I think I know when it's really working, when people start to imitate you and steal your stuff.
Have you had that, James? Tell us the story of when it happened to you, because I know the story. Go on, don't mention any names.
It's happened a few times now, and the reason I was thinking, on Friday night, Alice and I we went and saw Ricky Gervais. He was playing at Wembley, and he's a great comedian, and I see his thing, and a lot of people kind of try to take off his thing a little bit because it's obviously successful and he fills big venues, but no one's really him in the way that he writes and the way that he presents and his point of view in the world. But I do remember early on, probably the second year that I was speaking, and it wasn't actually me, it was Alison that walked through an auditorium. I was speaking on the main stage, and there was a smaller room, and she was just kind of walking through this other room, and there was a speaker basically delivering my speech. It was almost word for word, and I'm not going to. I want to see who the speaker is. But actually, what was interesting is, and this just tends to what you find, is he flamed out pretty quickly because he didn't have any original content. He was basically just taking other people, and that's fine. Early on, you go and do a little bit of. You have some other people's things within there. Maybe you've learned something from this management theorist, and you can put that in. But you have to kind of develop your own one. And then the best one of all. I was doing an event, once again, I can't say, it was in Asia, I can't say who the speaker was, but I was in the audience, I was the main speaker in the end of the morning, and there was a speaker that came up before me who was a management school professor, and he came up and he was basically doing entire segments of my bit with my slides behind me, the slides I originally created. And at first I was sitting there thinking, okay. And I was as I'm watching, I thought, am I using that slide? And because some of these slides were from older presentations I'd done 2 years before, which are now available on YouTube to watch. So I thought, actually, no, I've got new material. There's none of that stuff that's new. But it's a little bit shocking and surprising, but also it does mean something's obviously working. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, as they say.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how I'd react to that, but it's one of the reasons I wrote my book, actually. And we talked about books on a previous episode, but one of the reasons I wrote my book is that people were quoting me and using my content. And I thought, well, hang on, this is actually mine. So these are my stories. These are my experiences. These are my clients that I've worked with. And it was when people were quoting my case studies as their work. And I thought, nah, that's not on. You can't do that. So there are some very naughty people out there. And I think, from time to time, we all might quote something without realizing it belongs to somebody else, but it might be a small quote. And I know I've been guilty of that without realizing that it was somebody else's. But I think to take a whole chunk of somebody's work and to take a whole concept and that, I think that's just awful, really.
And actually, you mentioned Sarah Furness. I did an event recently with Sarah in Athens, and I'd never seen her speak before, and she was great, and I really enjoyed her speak. And there was a quote that she put up, which was an Einstein quote. And I'd never seen this quote. You think you've seen all these Einstein quotes, but I actually hadn't seen this one before. So it does pay value. She credited the person whose quote it was, because I have seen, and once again, the names will not be repeated here, I have seen speakers go up and deliver like a really powerful quote on stage with this, the thing, and then they put their name underneath it. And actually it was Buddha or Roosevelt or someone else. And I think also because in this case, this person appeals to a very young age demographic, and many of them just wouldn't have known that this actual line came from, I think it was the Buddha that actually said the line originally. It was his line, but he put himself as his name. So people can be a bit cheeky. But so we're going to talk about positioning strategy. We have gone a bit, but getting known. Let's go to the more tacticals. I know our listeners love when we go a little bit more tactical with things. So let's start to break it down into, okay, you've got your position, you kind of know your positioning, you have a sense of what your brand's about, how you differentiate yourself in the market, what you want to say. How do you actually get that message out there? What are the different formats and different ways you can get out there?
Well, we're podcasting at the moment. Podcasts and YouTube, this goes on YouTube too. That's really great. Certainly YouTube for speakers is great for people to see speakers on video, whether you're presenting and speaking to camera in the same way as we are, or whether you're presenting on stage. So video for sure. Social media. We know when I started out many years ago in this industry, we weren't using social media to get known as a bureau to promote our speakers. And social media now is fantastic. You can't ignore it. And then, of course, there's the old-fashioned route of just going out there and speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking. But sometimes you need to use the social media, YouTube, all of these other platforms in order to get onto those stages. But to quote Jamil Qureshi, he may not have been the first person to say this. I don't know. Please write in. The more you speak, the more you speak. So that's his philosophy, is that, every time he speaks, he gets booked at least couple of times more, and that's how he grows his business. That works when you're good, right? It doesn't work so well if you're not so good.
So social media, when we talk, obviously there's lots of different platforms for social media. Which ones actually move the needle for speakers? Because I know if I look at my stats, I think the last time we checked, it was like 0.4% of our traffic really comes in from social media, and I don't even know what percentage is going to be in terms of inquiries, but it's a really low number. I know that from social media, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've just not been doing it properly.
I think possibly you may not realize that that's where people are finding you originally and then going onto your website, because finding a website is sometimes harder than finding a LinkedIn profile. but people will then go onto the website to get more information. So I don't know that I would question whether it's as low as that. And obviously SEO and websites really important too, or as we were talking about the other day, AEO, it's sort of, AI searches are going to be more and more important. So it depends who your target audience is, but I do think LinkedIn is great. I think LinkedIn is great. Whether you are putting information out there and posts out there, or whether you're using it to connect with bookers, certainly you should be building a network. But if you look at people like Ross Bernstein, for example, and Jamil Qureshi, both of those guys, their posts are about the events that they're doing, where they're speaking. And that's really the majority of their posts, 99% of it. They're talking about where they're speaking and who they're speaking to and what they're delivering. And it's great, it's advertising. And people are thinking, FOMO, hang on, it keeps popping up. He's spoken there, he's spoken to our competitor here, etc., etc. It works really well. So the FOMO factor works quite well.
But Jamil does it in quite a nice way, and it doesn't work for me and necessarily my voice, but it works for him, is because he's kind of got this irreverent sense of humor, and he's kind of got this interesting sense of humor. So he will mention the fact he's speaking at some big legal conference, but that's not what he leads on. He leads on the fact that, and he starts with a funny line, like something is a pattern interrupt, you would call it in NLP, I guess, but a funny line that's like, oh, that's not usual, because most stuff on LinkedIn's boring. So you and usually there's a funny photo or there's something. But within that, as you're reading it, and this is why he's very good, he then talks about, I'm in such and such doing this event for this wonderful client, blah, 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 from this industry. But it's almost like not the thing that he leads with. It's something else. And that's because he's using his British humour, combining it with his, what he's known for.
Yeah, crazy humour, a little bit Monty Python at times, I think. And Ross, on the other hand, does it very differently, where he makes the client the hero of his posts, and that's how he also speaks. He makes the client people the heroes of his content, and his speeches, which I think is a lovely way to be remembered and something lovely to get known for as well. Yeah.
So I remember when a few years ago, we were kind of trying lots of different things, experimentation. So we'd set our big picture, the strategy, the positioning, the branding, and then we said, every month, let's try a new experiment. Let's assume 50% of them are going to fail, a new marketing experiment. So it could be SEO, it could be social media, it could be ads, or whatever the thing was. And we kind of went through that. And after a while, there's the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule. But what most people, I think maybe you talk about this in the book as well, that the Pareto Principle is fractal. So it's 74-4.
64-4,
yeah.
64-4, and then
64-4, sorry.
4-0.8 or 4-1.
Yeah.
We've lost everybody. So everyone's turned off. They've all turned off now.
So all the maths nerds are going, finally, someone's talking about Pareto Principle. Sorry, Wilfredo. So the idea was that 4% of your inputs will result in 64% of your outputs. So I took this to heart. And I said, listen, we're trying all these things, all these experiments. What four things do we do that will generate 64% of the results? And we found out what they were, and we actually looked at them. So we found out, in our case, it was SEO, it was ads, it was partners, which includes bureaus, and finally it was outreach, like actually really going out to potential clients. These were the four things that moved the needle for us, and said, that's why we don't focus so much on social media, because it never worked for us initially. Maybe it's changed now. So we really doubled down on those things, and that definitely generates probably more than 64% of the leads that come in just from those four things. And it meant we didn't have to worry. I mean, I still do TikTok and all these other things, but they're more as some of them are more fun than anything else. Not necessarily that they drive much business.
I think it's to do with visibility on social media, because if you're visible and people are seeing you regularly, they know you're still there, they're reminded of you, and they tend to be lurkers. And when I talk about social media, I don't see it as a one-way posting platform. I see it as an outreach platform, that you're making connections and then you're doing outreach. The outreach piece is actually, for me, number one in terms of getting business. So it's interesting that it's in your four. For me, it would be, if you're doing just one thing, do outreach. And that's what we used to do in the bureau. We used to outreach. That was it, really.
And I haven't done this so much. I'm a little bit out of kilter with it, but certainly early on, the first few years, this is really how I thought was. I split my day between campaigning, creating and campaigning. So in the morning was creating content, whether it's Keynote content or some kind of content, and in the afternoon was about campaigning. So it was going out, pushing out, getting known in those different things. Because where I've seen a lot of speakers fall down is that they've got so into the content piece and falling in love with their content and researching their content and refining their content, no one ever knows about it. And so that's the way that we did it. And you don't have to do it like that. You don't have to you could do like Monday, Wednesdays as like content days, and you could do it other ways. But certainly just kind of having times in the calendar where I'm actively going out doing outbound, or I'm actively going out doing updating our ads that we're doing, for example. I think that was a really effective thing that not just me, but our whole team decided to do in terms of how we split our time.
Loved it. And do you know, it's exactly what I used to do when I started out in this industry and I was trying to build up my database and build up my bookings and building up my client. I did it the other way around. I spent the mornings doing my outreach so I would get out the way. I'm a morning person anyway. I prefer mornings. Yeah. So I'd get in and I'd usually read a bit of a book to get me in the mindset, usually a sales book or a marketing book. And then I'd hit those, I'd be on the phone because I want immediate yes or immediate no. So I still believe in telephones. Maybe I'm old fashioned, but, and then in the afternoons, I would literally spend 3 hours on the phone solid, wouldn't even get up for a cup of tea or anything. That was it. Then I could have my cup of tea. I'd just call after call after call after call, voicemails, messages, whatever. And then in the afternoon, I'd do all the admin related to it. And of course, in the beginning, we didn't have social media. But if I had social media, I would be certainly using that too. But I'd be using it for research. And I think social media is fantastic for researching opportunities.
Now, we definitely have to do a future episode on sales, because I want to know everything you know about sales, because you've been doing this a long time. You are an absolute master at sales. I don't think I'm a particularly good sales person necessarily. So I want to learn from you on that. But as we start to finish up here, let's give folks some tools. When it comes to being known, so we've talked about social media, we've talked about content marketing, advertising, other things as well. Is there one tool that you find pretty indispensable for you being known?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, a tool that I found that is really good, and we'll share a link in the notes afterwards. So for me, things shifted, and I'm sometimes I'm on LinkedIn a lot and sometimes I'm not, but my content shifted when I was able to analyze it and get really good analytics, because no disrespect to LinkedIn, but your analytics are not the best. I'm sure they will get better. And I use an app called the Shield app. And I found that, do you use that at all? I found that really useful. I'll tell you what I love about it. One, it's not expensive. That's really great. But secondly, you can go back in history to the beginning of time, the beginning of your LinkedIn, and see how things are progressing. And you can see the engagement on your posts. You can see what's working, what time is working, what type of post is working, what your engagement is. And for me, the metric isn't necessarily impressions, it's engagement. I want people engaging and having conversations with my posts, because I think that's the real value of social media. If you're getting discussions, and therefore you can then take those discussions into the real world as well. And that's why I feel that social media is really valuable, because you have discussions with people that you wouldn't know. And, you know, I've had clients come to me that I would never have reached had it not been for LinkedIn. So Shield app, we'll stick a little link in the notes. Yeah. What about you?
That is not an app I know, so I'm going to go and check that out just now, because I agree. LinkedIn analytics are terrible, and so I'm going to go and check that app out. For me, you actually mentioned it, I think, pretty early in the book, or maybe it's in that chapter on Known. If you don't, the Bookability Formula is the book I'm talking about, by Maria Franzoni. Is that you talk about Gary Vaynerchuk, where he is documenting his life and his work, and that's how he's creating content all the time. And so the app I'm going to give a shout out to is Opus, which we use for this show, which all we do is, like, when we finish editing the show, I do a quick edit. I use a tool called Riverside for doing this, but we do a very simple edit. I'm not a very good editor. And then we throw that into Opus, and it uses AI and different things to basically cut that up into 10, 20 short video clips. So if you're watching this just now and it's a short video clip, whether it's on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, it has been created using Opus.pro is the website. And I just find that great because it just means like an episode like this, if I look at the stats, a very small number will listen to the entire audio podcast or watch the entire YouTube video of this interview, this podcast we're doing episode. But when you tally up all those watches and views of the short videos, it's much, much bigger. And that is the tool, Opus Pro, that we use to do that. So that's my little tip.
Are you telling me that people don't watch and listen to the entire episode? I mean, this is not good. Maybe we should just do short ones.
And if you don't, maybe we should. Maybe just we'll do TikTokable, stackable content. So if people are watching this, maybe they're watching a short clip, you want to watch the whole thing, head over to SpeakersU.com and you can watch all the episodes or you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your audio podcasts. And if you have an episode that you'd like Maria and I to cover in the future, then reach out to us at hello@speakersu.com, and we'll put that into the mix. So I think we know a little bit more about knowing now after this.
We do, and you can probably hear my dogs, both of them, barking in the background now. Could you hear them both? And husband telling them to shut up.
That's our cue.
That's our cue. Yes.
That's our cue to go. That's true. So from me, James Taylor.
And me, Maria Franzoni.
Thanks so much for listening to the SpeakersU podcast. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Do you dream of stepping on stage and being paid big, $10,000, $50,000, or even more for just one keynote? If you're ready to stop speaking for free or low fees and build a speaking business that generates real income, listen closely. Introducing the 7-Figure Speaker Program with James Taylor. He's trained hundreds of speakers to go from small stages to commanding big fees, teaching you the full system. Marketing, sales, craft, profitability. You'll get insider templates, email swipe copy, checklists, everything you need to book more gigs, raise your rates, win speaker bureau deals, and build evergreen revenue streams. If you want the strategy and tactics to build a global speaking business faster than you thought possible, this is your moment. Go to SpeakersU.com and get started today. The stage is ready for you.
Are you a speaker struggling to get the right bookings? Or wondering how to turn your expertise into a steady speaking income? Maria Franzoni knows exactly how bookers think. After years running a global bureau and representing some of the world's best-known names, she now works directly with speakers like you. Her one-to-one support gives you clarity, strategy, and the confidence to grow your business. Find out more at mariafranzoni.me